The movie opens with two co-workers on a date that isn't going very well. The woman, Mandy, is a single mother who is trying to find love before it's too late for her. She's so desperate that she accepts to go on a date with Pete, her co-worker, a conservative, religious man who doesn't like women very much. He thinks women are detestable, yet he can't be without one because he has masculine needs. Pete and Mandy have nothing in common. They both write for the same TV show, but Mandy loves writing about women in real life, and Peter writes about objectified women. Mandy is rather cynical when it comes to love. Pete is a romantic at heart, and he's desperately searching for his soulmate. He wants to fall in love hard with a woman to the point where he can't stay away from her. Mandy has never been in love before, but she knows that love alone isn't enough in relationships. He and his family are very religious, while Mandy and hers are atheists. Throughout their date, Mandy thinks Pete is a weird guy, but interesting in a strange way. She appreciates Pete's honesty. He laid down all his cards on the table on their first date, so there aren't any surprises to be seen in the future. He's safe. At the same time, Pete's far too strange for her and they are way too different. He thinks of women as objects that need to look pretty and submissive. Mandy is pretty, but she will never be submissive. She's independent and has raised a child by herself. After a long banter about modern women and how they had too much testosterone for Pete's taste, they decide to wrap up the dinner. Mandy quickly runs away from the restaurant and vomits while Pete tells her that they are going to be married in a year. Somehow, Pete thinks their date was the beginning of a romantic love story. He even runs after her cab as she goes away as if he's losing the love of his life. Mandy thinks the guy is a freak, and that makes him perfect for her. She's not known for making good decisions when it comes to men. When Mandy comes back home, her mother, Marion, wonders how the date was. She wants Mandy to meet a man and get married already. She's also traditional and doesn't like the fact that Mandy is a single mother. Mandy tries to tell her that she and Pete are just platonic and not going to happen, but Marion simply ignores her. Mandy doesn't sleep at night. She's anxious about her life and choices. Every day she repeats a mantra that she loves herself when she gets up from bed and hopes that if she says it enough, she will believe it. Moving on, she takes her son, Larch, to school and watches as he walks away from her in a huff. Larch has been acting out and rebellious. He has a bad habit of blinking too much and he's skittish. Whenever Mandy tries to kiss or touch him, he flinches away from her. Mandy tries to be positive, but her son acting like that is taking its toll. It makes her question her ability to take care of him, whether she's being a good mother or not, and if he needs a paternal figure in his life. Still thinking about her son, Mandy tries to put on a smile and pretend everything is fine. Like her mantra, she hopes that if she does it often, it will become true. Mandy notices that she isn't the only woman trying to get by. Her mind is a jumble of negative thoughts that she forcibly tries to replace with positive ones. To make things even more complicated, her boss tells her that she needs to stop writing about unhappy women because no one wants to know about that. People want to watch beautiful and successful women thriving in life, not women struggling with family, work, and relationships. Pete, who works in the same department as Mandy, agrees with that notion. He thinks that women need to be there for men, smiling and being graceful. They need to accept traditional gender roles and be mothers and wives. Mandy hears him say that and for some reason, she's weirdly captivated. She wonders if it would be so bad to let go of her open-mindedness to become the housewife material he was talking about. Her life has been miserable with the way she has been living. Maybe if she changes her personality and becomes a different person, things would work out. After work, Mandy goes to one of her friends' houses to have a girls' night. They use substances to make themselves happier, and she listens while her friend vents about the last date she had. It's the same issue as always. She tried to be what the man supposedly wanted her to be and it didn't work out in the end. Mandy starts feeling anxious about her friend's story. It's like she's trapped on a cycle of tragic stories, hers included. It reminds her of her date with Pete and how strange it was. She doesn't like Pete. She has nothing in common with him. At the same time, there isn't a line of men trying to date her. With her son acting out, her mother's pressure to find a husband, and her life crumbling all around her, maybe Pete isn't that bad. When she goes back home, intoxicated and a bit out of it, her father, Vic, is there. He came to visit because he's traveling to Thailand in a couple of days. Vic and Marion have recently divorced after years of marriage. Marion says that it was because she had to do everything for Vic and received nothing in return. She dedicated years of her life to being a good wife and mother until it got to a point where she couldn't do it anymore. Now Marion is living with Mandy, with no prospects in life while Vic is going to have fun in Thailand. Mandy tiredly listens to them arguing over their failed relationship. Vic storms out of the house while Marion yells after him. Her parents' relationship makes Mandy wonder again what is necessary to have a good relationship. Her mother followed the conservative gender role of being the housewife that takes care of the family. She ended up divorced anyway. Seeing her mother so bitter and lost triggers Mandy's fears and she decides to try again with Pete. Pete asks to meet Larch, so Mandy takes her son with her to their next date. It's a disaster. Pete thinks he can discipline Larch without even getting to know him and he criticizes the way Mandy educates him. Mandy feels bad and starts crying. It's been so hard to juggle being a good mom and working, and to hear someone say she's doing a bad job hurts. Pete doesn't know how to properly comfort her, so he starts kissing her eyes. Mandy finds it caring and gentle, even though his harsh words were the reason she was crying in the first place. The rest of the date is weirdly pleasant for Mandy. Pete tries to connect with Larch, but Larch is unpredictable. He seems to have fun at one moment, and at the other, he's throwing a tantrum and complaining. The date goes well until Larch starts yelling and crying in front of everyone because of a balloon. Mandy is so embarrassed by the situation that she is paralyzed. She doesn't know how to control her son, and Pete tries to help by yelling at Larch that he's embarrassing them. Then, Pete throws himself on the ground and starts throwing a tantrum too. The mood quickly sours after that. They go home and Larch reveals that he threw a tantrum on purpose to bother Pete. Mandy listens to her son catatonically. She tucks him to bed and says that she loves him so much that it hurts. Larch never says it back to her. Once again, Mandy is hurt and afraid that she isn't enough for her child, and he needs a male presence in his life. She goes back to the living room where Pete is waiting for her. She apologizes for her son's behavior and then starts for him to see the parts of her body she hated. She does it because she's insecure about showing her whole body and him rejecting her. Pete criticizes parts of her body he also doesn't like, but overall he enjoys what he sees. When Mandy is finally without clothes, they get intimate for the first time. Pete sleeps at her house and the next morning, he meets Marion. She's satisfied to see Mandy moving on with her life and finding a man, though Pete is a weird one. As he eats cereal, he nonchalantly tells Mandy that he wants to take her and Larch to his friend's wedding out of town. Mandy accepts it. During the trip, Larch throws a tantrum again and annoys Pete. He tries to educate him, but Larch barely listens to his mother, much less a stranger. To calm the boy down, Pete puts his head out of the window and opens his mouth like a dog. Larch finds it funny and laughs. This breaks the ice between them, at least for the moment. They arrive at Pete's parents' house and Mandy gets to meet his whole family. They stay in a decrepit old house that Mandy finds very weird. Pete's mother talks about marriage with Mandy as if she and Pete are already engaged. One of his sisters keeps asking if she's ready to belong to Pete as if Mandy is an object to be owned. Pete's father asks if Larch was a mistake and his mother wants to know if his father is present. It's all too much for Mandy, and Pete doesn't help at all. When his sisters are picking on him and his previous relationships, he has an attack of anger and throws his glass on the wall. Mandy is shocked, but his family is not surprised by his behavior. When Mandy notices that no one is bothered by Pete's sudden attack, she decides to go with the flow and doesn't mention it again. As with everything in her life, she ignores the obvious. Pete is a violent person, despite his meek appearance and his romanticism. The following day, they go to Pete's friend's wedding. During the priest's speech, he angrily talks about how men should love their wives as they love themselves. Mandy wonders what it would be like to be loved like that. It's much easier said than done. She doesn't know a single relationship that works that way. She can only hope that Pete thinks like that, though his hateful and violent personality makes her doubt it. During the wedding's reception, Mandy meets Cressida, the bride, and the groom, Woody. Cressida is a beautiful woman, all feminine and conventional like Pete liked. He even comments that when he looks at her, he thinks of milk because she's so maternal. It surprisingly upsets Mandy because she gets jealous of him and the way he admires Cressida. The woman is nothing like Mandy, so his offhanded compliment hurts her. When they meet, Cressida is nice and sweet to Mandy. She tells her that Pete has a big heart and that he is a delicate flower beneath all his anger and hatred. It's hard to believe, but for some reason, Mandy decides that Pete is worth it. Cressida is the first woman that looks genuinely happy in a relationship that Mandy has ever met. Her speech about love gives her an impulse to kiss Pete, so she does. Mandy's biggest wish is to have a relationship like Cressida and Woody, one that people would look at and admire. Maybe Pete is her chance for that. After dancing with him and having a lot of fun, Mandy is sitting with Larch when a man approaches. He used to work with Mandy, and he knew Cressida. He's Larch's father. Pete immediately notices it because Larch and he have the same tics, and they look alike too. He gets angry with Mandy and calls her selfish for not telling the father or the child who they are to each other. Mandy explains that she didn't want to have a relationship with Larch's father, so she decided not to tell anyone who he was and raise Larch by herself. Pete gets even angrier and starts saying that women always try to make their lives harder than they need to be. It hurts Mandy that he's talking to her without knowing what she has been through, and she wants to cry. Instead, she starts to yell that relationships are not like that priest was talking about. They are complicated and mean, sometimes they work, and others they don't. She slaps Pete and, to her shock, he slaps her back. He calls her a sad and hopeless woman before leaving her there. Embarrassed, Mandy runs away from the party, leaving Larch behind. She feels completely lost again. She had hoped that Pete was going to be a good boyfriend, maybe even a husband. He could be Larch's father. Instead, he's just a sad excuse of a man who wants things to go his way or no way at all. He wants to educate Larch and criticizes Mandy, yet he has never had a child and doesn't know the feeling. He calls Mandy selfish, but in their entire relationship, they did what he wanted to do. He wants romance and love, yet treats Mandy terribly. So much so that as soon as she leaves the party, he starts flirting with another woman. Mandy runs until her feet carry her to a pub that her father likes to frequent. She has a heartfelt conversation with him in which she tells him that she hates him for what he made her become. She thinks that he made her become a distrustful, cynical adult, and now she has trouble trusting people, particularly men. Her father is not in his right mind after drinking one too many, but he loves Mandy and thinks she was the greatest gift in his life. His problem is that he got tired of living a meaningless life with Marion, and decided to be selfish and enjoy it while he could. To end their conversation, he accidentally slips that Marion is sick and probably won't have much longer left. Mandy is shocked by that information and angry that her mother told her father before her. She immediately goes back home to talk to Marion. She wants to understand what her mother is going through and the reason why she didn't tell her. Marion simply didn't want to add more grievance to Mandy's plate. Despite always asking when Mandy is going to get married, she admires her more than she admits. Mandy became a mother alone, and she didn't care if she had a husband or not. It's something that Marion could never do. That's why she stayed with Vic for so long, even though she was unhappy. The prospect of raising her children by herself was scary. Not for Mandy, though. She wonders about Pete, but Mandy doesn't want to talk about him after the awful evening they had. Meanwhile, Pete's in the kitchen making breakfast for them. Vic is also there, and he starts criticizing Mandy to Pete. He says that she used to be a lovely child, though sometimes she was scary. Pete comes to her defense and says that he loved that about her, that she can be sweet, but a bit unhinged at the same time. He thinks she's the type of woman who will be able to understand him and care for him, even though he can be weird sometimes. Later on, they are on a train on their way to work, when Mandy suddenly proposes to Pete. He accepts it. The scene shifts to Marion and Vic as they reminisce about their terrible relationship. Mandy and Pete are a mirror of what Marion and Vic used to be. Marion was a ray of sunshine, sweet and beautiful, and she was willing to love Vic with her full heart. Vic admits he ruined her. He betrayed her in their marriage by going out with other women and leaving Marion to take care of the kids by herself. It got so bad that Marion confesses to not remembering Vic's eye color because she hasn't looked at him properly in years. Unknowns to Mandy, she's following in her mother's footsteps. Marion would rather Mandy get married to a bad man than continue as a single mother, so she always pushes Mandy to be with Pete. Back at her work, Mandy is tired of hearing her boss deny every idea the other female writers give. He wants the male gaze, not the female. When he asks Mandy for her idea, she tells him a terrible plot for a TV show with Beyonce, and he freaks out. Mandy decides she can't take her boss or her job anymore, and she quits. Before she goes, she throws a chair at her boss' office and breaks the glass. Then, she and Pete run away together. Back at home, Mandy overhears her parents talking about her father's affairs. It's the first time she hears them talking normally, without offending or screaming at each other. Vic notices her listening to it and closes the door in her face. Later on, she gets intimate with Pete, but he can only finish when Mandy talks dirty to him, telling him a story of a man who only wants to use a woman for his. When it's over, it's awkward between them because Mandy feels as if she isn't enough for him. If they don't even have physical attraction between them, she wonders what else they have. She knows that it isn't his mind that attracts her. He may be honest, but they believe in completely different things. She has no idea what the point of their relationship is. The following day, when she's taking Larch to school, he starts throwing a tantrum again. This time it's about her and where she's going to go when she passes away. His grandma slowly passing away because of a disease is taking a toll on him. He doesn't understand what passing away truly means, so he is confused. He's afraid when Mandy passes, they won't go to the same place because he believes in heaven, and she doesn't. He starts yelling at her, kicking the door of a random house, all while Mandy shakes and silently freaks out. Her mother's passing is taking a toll on her too, and there isn't anyone to comfort her. When he throws his bag, he accidentally hits a pigeon and the bird falls on the ground with its wing broken. Larch stops yelling and tries to approach the bird, but he's afraid. Mandy takes the bird and they take it home to care for it. A bird with a broken wing is the perfect analogy for Mandy, Marion, and even Larch. They were all hurt, and their wings are only waiting for someone to care for them. It's not too late for Marion, because she made her peace with Vic in her last moments. For Mandy, it's not going to be Pete. He comes to an epiphany that he doesn't want her anymore. He sees her as far too complicated, and he only wanted a woman to take care of him, to go with him on the journey that is life. Mandy has too many problems with that. For that reason, while she's suffering because her mother is passing away, he breaks up with her. Not only that, he confesses to sleeping with someone else because he wanted to be with someone who could be vulnerable with him. When Mandy goes back home after their breakup, she has her epiphany. She remembers her childhood, how she grew up in a broken home with two broken parents. Her mother used to be meek, to sit back and take whatever Vic gave to her. Then, she started hitting back because she realized she didn't deserve crumbles, and that was all he could give her. Mandy watched her parents break apart, and how lonely and bitter her mother turned out to be. Mandy remembers her child, and how he's experiencing the same thing she did in her childhood. A mess of a family, that's why Larch acted out so much. Mandy doesn't want to become a second version of her mother. She doesn't want to accept the crumbles a man thinks she deserves. That's what she's going to have with Pete. That's why they can't be together anymore. Marion passes away quietly. After she goes, Mandy's life changes for the better. She doesn't go back to Pete and focuses on herself and Larch. She's more centered and calm than she had been in years. Dating Pete seemed to help her figure herself out. In turn, breaking up with Mandy made Pete realize that he needed someone like her by his side. He started dating another girl, the perfect girl, just the way he wanted. She still wasn't good enough for him. He'd rather be with Mandy and all her misery than with a young girl that still thinks life is beautiful. It's ironic since all the female characters he always wanted to write about were the perfect women, the ones who didn't have any trouble. He wants Mandy to go back to him, and he tries to manipulate her again to be with him. He wants her to think that she needs him, but she doesn't. For the first time, Mandy is thinking about herself. And what she expects for the future isn't Pete. She realized that he hurt her, he was mean to her and Larch, and that the future with him would be painful and miserable, like Marion and Vic. Mandy makes the hard choice her mother never had the chance to make. She decides for herself and her kid. She leaves Pete behind, with his mouth hanging open at her rejection, and goes away with Larch. For the moment, her son is enough for her.